Hello there, my name is John Meyer. I've been making YouTube videos for the past year and a half, so I thought this would be a good time to make a video about how I edit my videos. Some of you have asked, some of you have not. Some of you may not be interested in this at all. I know most of you are music makers and not video makers, but they go hand in hand, at least they do in my brain. And if you write music that gets used with video, then maybe it's good to know about how videos are made. But really what this video is about is I want to walk you through some of the difficulties that I've faced, and not even in the creative side of things, but just getting the files on the computer in the right spot, loaded in the right way, and making them look okay in the end. Maybe another day I'll talk about how I shoot the videos and how I actually edit them in a creative way, but this is mostly about the technical stuff that took so much of my time in the beginning, and now it goes so much faster that I'm able to focus on the idea and the story and not get bogged down in all the horrifically boring and tedious details. This is probably 20 videos that I'm packing into one, but since I'm not really a channel about making videos, I'm going to give this to you. And for those of you interested, follow along, even if it doesn't all quite make sense. It helps to know what you need to know. And that's one of the issues I have with YouTube, is that we can get these little tidbits here, these tips that help, but sometimes we need the big picture. And maybe I can offer you that in this video. I'm going to talk about file management. I'm going to talk about proxies, which if you don't have the fastest computer, a proxy can really help you out. I'll talk about the basics of editing and some of the shortcuts I use. One of my favorite things about YouTube is that you can learn as you go, and I hope that I've demonstrated that if you followed me from the beginning. Lots of stuff in this room has changed. The way I light things have changed. The pace in which I edit, the way I use music and sound design, all those things have advanced. But in the beginning, you just have to have something decent to say that's informative. Start there and you can build as you go. So let's jump in, and we'll start with the very moment that I put the memory card into the computer. Now that the card is in the computer, I'm going to go find it. I shoot on a Sony a7S III, and that will matter some as we move forward. Sony has the strangest file structure ever. I go to private, M4 root, and then clip. And on this clip, I'm going to click list, and I shot everything on September 22nd. So I'm going to modify this, and I'm going to select all this footage from September 22nd. I like to create another window, move it over here. I'm going to put this all on my video current drive, which is simply a Samsung SSD in a dock through USB-A. So I'm leaving some speed on the table. I don't have a Thunderbolt drive, and maybe that's something I'll get in the future, but I found this works quite nice with my workflow. Before I transfer that footage, I'm going to go to this other spot. I have QNAP NAS, and that is Paper Walls, Video, YouTube. And in my current YouTube, which is not current actually, I have this project template, and I'm simply going to drag this over into my current drive. And now I can close this. This is where I will end up putting everything, and it actually works great to edit from, but I started doing this process and I'm going to stick with it for a while. If you've been working with audio your whole life, you probably thought, oh, these file sizes are huge. They're not. Video file sizes are massive. I'm going to take this template that I've copied over, and I'm going to rename this, and I'm going to call it Fort Worth because the shots were taken in Fort Worth, Texas. And then notice I have this folder structure, and I ripped this off from a guy on YouTube, and I will link to his video. I don't remember his name, but I'll be sure to put it up on the screen so I can give him proper credit. It's folders. So projects, footage, and output. So let's start with projects. Inside projects, I have Premiere Pro, After Effects, which I don't use enough, but I want to have it there. Lightroom, Photoshop for any kind of thumbnails or whatever I want to do later on. And then I added Pro Tools because I often will have a Pro Tools session. I used to keep those on other drives, and that was silly. It's better to keep them all together. But I'm going to go to Premiere Pro, and I'm going to rename this to Fort Worth. Now, I'm going to go into the footage section, and in the video folder, I'm going to go grab all of these files, including the XML document, and drag them over. While I'm copying, I'm going to go back to my card, and I'm going to back up to where it says sub. And what I'm going to do at sub is I'm going to go find everything from the 22nd again, and these are proxies. And a proxy is a smaller version of the file. It's exactly the same footage, but it's just a much smaller resolution and file size. I shoot everything in a somewhat compressed format on the Sony. And what that means is the file sizes are smaller, but the computer doesn't like the footage as much, so it's slower to edit. The larger the file size, the less compressed, the easier to edit. So I'm going with choosing the more compressed, smaller file size, and then I take these proxies, which I have it to where I can shoot them at the exact same time. I'm going to make a folder that I call Proxies. Now, I'm going to drag everything from September 22nd over into the Proxies folder. So you'll see 40.71 gigabytes for everything and just under 3 for the proxies. I'll let those load in. One thing I'll also do is normally make folders inside the video that would say the date of the shoot or talking head if it's just me talking, B-roll, or a specific location. But this is all from one spot, so I won't bother with that at this point. Oh, and down here we have output, which is just where I put the video when it's been exported, and the photos, the thumbnail, whenever it's been exported. Obviously, you can add folders all day long, but this seems to work well for me, at least to start a video. I'm gonna go to Projects, I'm gonna go to Premiere Pro, and I'm gonna open this in Premiere Pro. Now, I chose Premiere Pro because I have the bundle with Photoshop and After Effects. I suggest either DaVinci Resolve if you're just getting started because it's free, or Final Cut because it's Apple, it's a one-time fee. This is a subscription service. This is what Premiere looks like when I open it up. You can customize this all day long, and that can be kind of overwhelming because when you're watching other people's videos, everything's in weird spots. But all these little sections right here, you can grab them and move them into different sections, and you can build up. This is slightly compressed in because I have a wide monitor and I'm putting this down to 16:9 or 2:1, whatever. But say you might have a different workspace for a different computer or laptop. Okay, first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab my video, all of it, from the footage section, not the proxies though. I'm going to grab everything and I'm going to drag these into the video section. All this is telling me is that it couldn't load in those XML files. But notice that if I go to my project right here, this project tab, this is where all of these folders are, and they're already up and open because I access them a lot. And so if I click down here, here are all my video files. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on all of these, and I need to attach those proxies. And so the way that I do that is I select the first one, select the last one, shift click, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to go to proxy. Now, if you want to use proxies to increase your workflow, but you don't already have them, you have to create them. And you can use Media Encoder, which is another program. So if I hit create, it would ask me kind of what I want to make the proxy to be, and then it would use Media Encoder to do that. I'm going to simply attach these, so I go to Proxy, Attach Proxies, and then I go to Attach, and it already knows to look inside that Proxies folder. So I do a search, and it can't find them, and this is why. I'm going to go back to my Proxies folder, and inside my Proxies folder, I'm going to select all these, and I want these file names to be exactly the same as the original files. So I'm going to select all of these, and I'm going to go to rename, and I've already done this, you can see, but these files C1914S03. I want to find all the S03s, and I want to replace them with nothing. And I hit rename. Now, when I cancel this out, let's try this again. If I go to Proxy, Attach Proxies, hit attach on the first one, do a search, boom, it finds the very first one. I hit OK, and it connects all of the rest. So my proxies are loaded up. I know this is a lot of information. This is 2 years of me learning, so this is probably about 30 different videos. This happens to me most weeks. I get in, start talking, I'm like, that's like 20 videos. I'm gonna select all of this footage, and I'm going to drag it down into this drop media here to create sequence area. And it created a sequence from the footage. Now, I'm going to change the sequence up because right now, if I look at my sequence settings, the reason why I drag the footage in to create a sequence instead of just creating one is that I've had some issues with sequences not reacting well to the footage. So this way, it's creating the exact type of sequence I want when I drag that footage in. However, this is a 4K timeline at the moment. I'm going to make this a 1080p or a 2:1, meaning, okay, so 1080p is 1920 by 1080. I'm going to change this to 1080. And instead of making this 1920, I'm going to make it 2160, which is double 1080. So it's a 2:1 ratio instead of a 16:9, which Peter McKinnon told me to do so I'm going with it. I hit OK. Hit OK again, and now notice that my footage is way too close. It's also real punched in, which I'll get to in a second. So let's start here. I'm going to switch this. If I scaled this in effects controls to 50%, I'd get that. I don't want that. I've learned that 57% is about where it needs to be. Now, I'm going to take that, and I'm going to click where it says motion, and I'm going to copy, and I'm going to select all of these, and I'm going to paste. And so now all of my shots should be the right ratio there. Right now, it's playing back the big file, so it's a little slow. There's a cool face. But this right here is toggle proxies. And if that's not there, you can hit the plus button and go find it. But I toggle proxies, and that's going to link those proxies. And if I go here to where it says video and I scroll over, I see that my proxies are not attached. So I am going to select all these. I'm going to right click. I'm going to go to proxy, and I'm going to attach the proxies. Now that I can see those proxies are attached. All right. Now, when I finish, this scrubs through much better. Now let's look at this footage, and I want you to notice that it's very flat, right? That's because I shot it with a picture profile that's very flat. So picture profiles are a little tricky to understand, but basically what's happening is you've got your darks and your whites. Your darkest moments are down here at the bottom. Let's look at these, what's called my Lumetri Scopes. And notice over here that this is my darkest spots of the image, and this is my brightest spots of the image. And notice that everything is kind of in the middle. What a log picture profile does is it captures all that information in the middle, but then you can open it up. If you're using just a standard picture profile, it captures whatever dark information, shadows, or whatever bright information in the highlights. And if you blow those out, meaning you get too much of them, you can't ever get that information back. And if you have too much dark, then you can't ever get that information back in the shadows. And that's one of the reasons why I spent so much money on this camera, is it does a great job of that. However, I used cameras before this that did not do a good job of that, so I had to do a good job of making sure that I lit my scenes well, or at least made the proper choices on what needed to be featured. So sometimes that meant if there was a lot of information in the shadows, that I blew out the highlights. Or if there was a lot of information in the highlights, I would crush the blacks, and there wasn't any information to get out of there, but I had detail where I wanted it. You just have to make some choices. I can go into my Lumetri panel and kind of start unfolding this image by taking the blacks and bringing them down, taking the whites and bringing them up, and then increasing the contrast between the white and the dark and increasing my saturation. Now, that's an imperfect process, and thankfully, someone has already done this for me, and I bought these Luts, and these are called Rec 709 Luts, which basically gets you from this log image to a good starting point. Not the best description. But I'm going to go to the creative section of each, or I'm going to go to my first one here, just to make it a little bit easier. And this is me driving, or my friend driving, and I'm going to go to creative, and I'm going to load in a LUT here that's called, I can either do neutral, A7S3. Again, there's a lot to describe here, but I'm just going to keep going. And so what that did is it somewhat made my image look a little more natural, started to somewhat unfold those colors. And the reason I put it in the creative tab is that the basic correction happens before. So if I had some issues where, say, I needed to bring up the entire exposure of everything, I could do that before that LUT. Now that all this footage is laid out on the timeline, I'm going to grab all this and I'm going to move it over here. This is mostly B-roll, and I'm going to move this A-roll over. So the first thing I'll do, and I call this A-roll because it's me talking. This is my studio shot where I am right now, and I'm going to edit this down. And so I have set up some key commands that make this a lot easier. I watched a video by editor Matt, who used to work with Matty Opoya, and it was called like Premiere Pro shortcuts for gamers. And I'm not a gamer at all, but the shortcuts are great. So what I do, and I'm just going to have to tell you what they are, and I'll link to the video, but I have F set up to fast forward. And so most of the time when I'm listening to me, it's like this. And so what I do is I go to the first part of where I want to cut, and I have Q set up to ripple delete. I believe it's what it's called. It gets rid of everything up to the previous edit. So I hit Q, and then I hit play.
Hey there. In downtown Fort Worth today, my friend Jordan called me up and decided to come out and shoot some. I've been locked in the studio. I finished my videos. Hey there. A little bit different today.
This is so normal. There's usually 1,000 hey there's. But I know that I don't like that, so I move up to here, and I start here.
Hey there. A little bit different today. I'm out and about. My friend Jordan called me up and asked if I wanted to shoot, and I had been locked in the studio for what seems like months. It's been ridiculously hot. It's still hot today. For some reason, he thought it was going to be nice. But I guess 90 is still much better than 100.
Not funny.
The majority of my work is...
Look, I was nervous. There were people walking around. Cut me some slack, and I'm not using the video, so don't judge me. So I speed forward, and I get to this point.
The majority much better than 100. The majority.
So I'm just going to do a basic edit from this point, and I'm not going to worry about too many of those issues. But when it comes time to it,
Better than 100.
I can get to right here. Typically, what I'll do is I'll select these, and you can link these together by clicking on Linked Selection. And I'll hold down B, which is the yellow bar. I think it's a ripple something. I don't know. But I grab this, and then that moves everything back.
Better than 100. The majority of my...
This makes it tricky because usually I edit by audio, but we've got wind noise.
The majority...
I haven't dealt with wind noise a lot, but as we know, us musicians know, I could probably process this audio in Pro Tools really quickly and do a roll off everything below 100 hertz, and that might go away. But I'm going to hit B again to that point.
The majority of my work is in quarterly value. I altered in, and so now I'm in the process of thinking about what the next quarter is going to look like, and I just want to get out and put my camera in front of some different things I'm going to capture.
All right, so then I cut that, and then I'll move up to my next spot, and I'll probably just hit Q and get rid of everything.
I'm also talking to the camera as people walk by and drive by.
I know. Okay.
Oh, just like right.
So that's what I do. I go through and I get a basic, cohesive, somewhat making sense talking head, and that way I know I have a video. Like once I have that part done, I know, and I have a complete thought. And a lot of times I'll write out a script and it'll be like 2 pages long, and I'll cut half of it out in the edit after I recorded it, just because either I've already said it or it doesn't quite fit with the video. This has really helped me learn. This is a tough one. When you hear me say this, you may never want to make a video. But I'm learning through this that what I really am is a writer. And I never, ever, ever would have considered myself a writer. But I'm learning that if I want to create a clear thought for you all, it's got to be written down in advance. And then I try not to read it, because I've done that a few times where I read a script and it didn't work. Writing down those ideas and laying out that outline, even if it's not perfect, and write it in your speak. And mine is really bad, so I write it really bad, and I would never want any of you to read it. But I've learned that helps generate the ideas so that when I get in front of the camera, I'm ready to go. Today, on this very day when I was recording, I didn't do that, and I didn't land the plane, ever.
Something was big.
All right, so I'll go through, and then I'll go through each one of these tracks, my B-roll. I'll go through my B-roll, and I'll find moments of action that I like and usually chop those up. I kind of like that, so I'll cut, and then I have Z, which allows me to cut, and then I hit V, which is the selection tool, and I'll just move this over. I don't know what I was doing there. Get rid of all that. But then I'll go through and select my favorite parts. This is me trying to vlog. Jordan and I went into this old building, and I was just prepared to die. That's Jordan in fast forward.
We're here in Fort Worth. We get in a spot where I'm in good light.
Check it.
I don't know if you guys want vlogs from me.
No.
I don't know if I have what it takes to give you what you really want from me.
You don't.
See, I can't even do that. Speak to...
Just my face. It's just whatever. Cool shots of Jordan here, though. Tricks that I'm learning. backlight everything. So the backlight coming through there gives him dimension and shape and a nice silhouette, and it's really cool. This is all the stuff that might be kind of cool, and you're just not going to get it. This is what Fort Worth looks like on a work day. Cool shot. Newspaper. Me. Dr. Pepper's a big deal around here. Cool church, and this is where I knew I was going to sit down and talk a little bit, so I tried to get a few wide shots, and then there's Jordan filming me, which is awkward. Look at this guy, he doesn't know what to think. Me talking, the first angle, or that was the first angle, and then I went back and set up the A-roll. And then I tried to capture more detailed shots of that building. I thought that was a cool shot, kind of an old and new contrast. Okay, now I'm going to pretend I edit everything together, and I'm going to leave all the music stuff out, even though that is the most important, but we all know that. And then when I've got my video laid out just the way that I want it, the color is nice, and I've made my adjustments on each clip, and I've done my audio. Well, then I go through and I go on my main audio track into the audio mixer, and I typically, since I have it, I use FabFilter stuff. So on this one, I would just do a quick, since it's outdoors and it's a little rough, I do FabFilter Pro Q3, and then I'm going to click on this.
I'm stopping and acting like I'm not doing anything when somebody walks by.
And I have a little bit of a sinus issue, so I sound even more nasally. Roll off the bottom and try to get rid of some of that wind nose.
Clue that I'm talking to a camera.
And then see if I could dip out some of that nasally.
Yeah, I had 2 rooms. So I did the freelance call whenever something came up or the place was booked or whatever.
And then I would add my compressor. I'd go to dynamics.
And so I get called, and just so you know, at this point I am a Digi-001 Pro Tools user, right? I don't know anything about consoles or anything. And there was a
I load in the Pro voiceover sometimes.
console in this space. It was an old API console.
Adjust my threshold to where it's just hitting. And I dial that in, and I'll usually put a limiter on the master channel just to catch anything that goes over. And then it's time to export. Oh, I'm at 1%. So I go to File, Export, Media. And in this case, I'd rename my file, and I'm going to export. I'm going to double these numbers, 2160, right? So it's actually up-resing. And then if I can do software encoding, I can. I don't click anything else, but I raise my bit rate up to around 30, and I hit export, and I am done. That was way too fast. I know, way too much information, but at least kind of gives you an idea of what I'm doing, and hopefully it's helpful. And I'll get back to music next week. See ya.